6 seconds. That's all the pulse lasted before it vanished into static. Atlas had replayed signal 001 so many times the recording was starting to blur. He sat in the same workshop, cobalt lights dimmed low, unable to sleep. Every scientist eventually asked the same follow-up question after silence. Why? Not just, is anyone out there anymore? Now it was, why did they go quiet so fast? Atlas pulled up every theory he could find about vanishing signals. Most were about equipment errors, cosmic noise, coincidence. But one folder, buried deep in his archive, made his fur stand on end. A label simply read, Dark Forest. He hesitated before opening it. Some ideas, once heard, are hard to unhear. Atlas opened the file anyway. Cobalt light flickered as text began scrolling across the workshop wall. What he was about to learn would change how he used his antenna forever. Tonight's search wasn't about finding someone. It was about understanding why no one wants to be found. In 2008, science fiction author Liu Cixin published a novel called The Dark Forest. It wasn't a physics paper, but it proposed one of the eeriest answers to the Fermi paradox ever written. Liu Cixin imagined the universe as a dark forest at night. Every civilization is a hunter, moving quietly between the trees, rifle ready. If you hear a twig snap, you don't shout, hello, you freeze, or you shoot first. Because the only other hunters out there might be far stronger than you. Astrobiologist Ian Crawford put it simply, the Fermi paradox tells us civilizations are rare. It doesn't tell us why. One possible why, they aren't rare at all. They're just hiding. Atlas paused the recording, his ears flattening slightly. Hiding from what? This wasn't officially proven science. It was a hypothesis, a thought experiment built on cold logic. But cold logic, Atlas was learning, can still keep you up at night. He scrolled further into the file, searching for the reasoning behind the idea. It came down to two simple rules. Rules so simple, a baby fox could understand them, and so unsettling, he almost wished he couldn't. Axiom 1. Survival is every civilization's first and greatest priority. Not curiosity, not friendship, survival above all else. Atlas nodded slowly. That much made sense. His own antenna project had started from curiosity, but he'd still built alarms just in case. Axiom 2. Civilizations keep growing, but the matter in the universe does not. Picture every universe maker box on an infinite shelf, each one expanding to fill its space. Eventually, growing civilizations run into each other's shelves. And when resources are finite and everyone wants to survive first, growth becomes competition. Atlas drew two overlapping circles in the air with his light pen. Us and them. The overlap kept shrinking as both circles grew larger. It's not that aliens are evil, the file explained. It's that the math of scarcity makes trust expensive. Atlas erased the circles, uncomfortable with where the logic was heading. Two rules. That was it. That was the whole cold foundation. Survival first, resources limited. From those two lines alone, an entire universe could learn to whisper instead of shout. Atlas swallowed hard and kept reading. The next section had a name that sounded almost too polite for how unsettling it was. The chain of suspicion. Imagine Atlas meets a stranger civilization. He can't tell if they're friendly, but here's the twist. They can't tell if HE is friendly either. So Atlas has to guess what they think of him, while guessing what they think he thinks of them. Atlas's head started spinning, trying to follow his own sentence. The chain goes on forever. Suspicion nested inside suspicion, inside suspicion. And here's the cruelest part. Even a totally friendly civilization can't prove its friendliness from a distance. Words, promises, gestures, none of it crosses light years fast enough or safely enough to be trusted. So the safest choice, cold logic says, is silence. Or worse. Atlas thought about signal 001 again. 6 seconds, then gone. Had someone out there gone through this exact chain of suspicion about him? He rubbed his paws together nervously, staring at the dark ceiling of hexagons from episode 11. One more piece of the puzzle remained. How fast could a friendly, civilization actually turned dangerous? The file had an answer for that too, and it was the part that scared Atlas most. The concept was called technological explosion. Look at human history. For thousands of years, technology crept forward slowly. Then, in barely 200 years, humanity went from horse-drawn carts to spacecraft. A civilization that looks harmless today could be terrifyingly advanced tomorrow. Cosmically speaking, almost overnight. So even meeting a weaker civilization is a gamble. How strong will they be in 10 years? 100? Atlas imagined a small campfire in his metaphorical dark forest, suddenly flaring into a wildfire. If you can't predict how fast a stranger might grow, the only safe bet is to remove the uncertainty entirely. Atlas didn't like that sentence. He read it 3 times. He thought about his own antenna, built in a single afternoon, with scrap parts and curiosity. What would it look like to someone who didn't know his intentions? Only his growing signal strength. A small, harmless fox with a big, loud machine. Atlas glanced nervously at the antenna dish above him, suddenly aware of how loud it must have sounded. The dark forest file ended with a single, closing line. The universe is not silent because it is empty. It may be silent because it is listening. Atlas closed the file. The workshop felt colder than before. A thought crept in that Atlas couldn't shake. In episode 11, he hadn't just listened, he had broadcast, pinging the honeycomb grid cell by cell. If the dark forest idea held even a grain of truth, he hadn't just searched for someone, he'd announced himself. Atlas's paws went cold on the control panel. He pulled up the honeycomb grid from last episode, and one cell was glowing faintly amber again. The same cell, the same 6-second pattern. This time, it didn't feel like discovery. It felt like being noticed. In the flat 2D dark beyond the dome, Atlas imagined countless tiny points of light, eyes, watching from between imaginary trees. It was probably nothing, static, coincidence, right? But probably isn't the same as certainly. And out here, that gap can matter a lot. Atlas's tail puffed up slightly, an instinctive, ancient fox reflex to a feeling of being watched. He forced himself to breathe slowly. Fear makes for bad science. Still, maybe it was time to change how he searched. Not stop searching, just search more quietly. Atlas made a decision. No more broadcasting, only listening. He rewired the antenna's core, disconnecting the outgoing signal array entirely. A new label lit up on the control panel. Passive mode, receive only. It felt strange, turning down his own voice after working so hard to build it. But the dark forest hypothesis, however unproven, taught him something the Fermi paradox alone hadn't. Listening and shouting are not the same risk. It's important to remember this is a hypothesis, not a confirmed law of the universe. Many scientists find it too pessimistic, assuming every civilization thinks the exact same way. Still, as a caution, it's a reasonable one. The cosmic equivalent of looking both ways before crossing. Atlas taped a new note above his workbench, right next to the old one from episode 11. It read, "Absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, but neither is silence proof of safety." He sat back, watching the honeycomb grid glow softly, no longer transmitting, only listening. Was this loneliness again? Or was this something else? Patience, sharpened into caution. Atlas realized both could be true at the same time. He thought of Architect Boy, asleep 3 rooms away, blissfully unaware of any of this. Some fears, Atlas decided, a mechanic keeps to himself, so the people he protects can keep dreaming safely. Atlas logged tonight's findings under a new file. Dark Forest, Working Hypothesis. Status, unresolved. Priority, ongoing caution. He dimmed the workshop lights, leaving only the honeycomb grid glowing faintly overhead. If the universe truly was a dark forest, waiting quietly wasn't defeat, it was strategy. But Atlas, being Atlas, couldn't stay passive forever. A new thought sparked, quieter than fear, but just as strong. If listening from home isn't enough, maybe it's time to go look for himself. Careful, quiet, but moving. He glanced at a folded silver traveling case in the corner of the workshop, unused since episode 8. Not yet, he thought, but soon. Every subscriber tuning in becomes part of this quiet watch. Another careful ear helping keep the search safe. Thank you for listening tonight, architects. Sometimes the bravest thing a mechanic can do is stay quiet on purpose. The antenna dish powered down to standby, its cobalt light fading to a soft pulse. Somewhere out in the dark, something may still be watching. See you next transmission.